All right, in this section, we're going to look at the filtration process. So, what's going on with that? And the kidney will convert the blood plasma to urine in 4 stages. Okay, so we have glomerular filtration. So, the glomerulus, which has the podocytes, fluid will be pushed into that, and the filtration process begins. And then you have tubular reabsorption. So this is keeping of the good stuff. And then you have tubular secretion. Okay, this is getting rid of the bad stuff. And water conservation, which means you're going to keep more water than you're going to get rid of. As fluid is entering into the capsular space, it's called glomerular filtrate. So it's not urine yet. Okay, so this fluid is a filtrate. When it gets into the tubules, that's the tubular fluid. And then once it passes throughout through that process, then we have actual urine. Okay, and here's those 4 steps outlined in with an animation, little picture format here. The glomerular filtration. Okay, so fluid is coming in. Tubular reabsorption, tubular secretion, and then water conservation, keeping more water than you're going to get rid of. All right, the podocytes. So there's the cell body of a podocyte. These are the tiny little slits that are going to allow certain things to pass through, and it's going to keep other things, such as proteins and red blood cells. All right, so here is an example of that. So the red blood cell is too big to pass through. And so that's why if you see blood in the urine through a urine analysis, something not good is going on, because you should not see blood in the urine. Okay, with filtration pressure, first we need a pump. Okay, so that pump, which is the heart, has to push fluid. Okay, so it's going to have to push fluid into the kidneys. Okay, and we measure that in millimeters of mercury, right? So that's the amount of pressure. So blood hydrostatic pressure is a lot higher here inside of the glomerulus area compared to about 10 to 15 millimeters of mercury in most other capillaries. Okay, once this happens, then there's some forces to understand here, and one of them is hydrostatic pressure. The colloid osmotic pressure and the glomerular filtration. Okay, colloid osmotic pressure is the pressure created by dissolved proteins in the blood. Okay, so we have a blood vessel. Okay, and inside you have a bunch of dissolved proteins. Okay, and what that helps do is pull water back in to the vessel. Okay, so fluid is able to come back in. All right, fluid actually will exit. Okay, so that's the outflow, and then fluid will then come back in. So colloid osmotic pressure allows the pulling of water back in to the vessel. Okay, that's the inward force. So the net filtration pressure, therefore, okay, so net filtration pressure is hydrostatic pressure minus colloid osmotic pressure. All right, so in other words, the outward force, so hydrostatic pressure is the outward force, is stronger than the inward force, which is the colloid osmotic pressure. All right, so one more time, hydrostatic pressure is the outward force, so fluid leaving the tube, and it is stronger than the inward pressure, which is the colloid osmotic pressure. Okay, so fluid will move out of the capillary, so that's filtration. If the inward force is stronger, fluid will move back into the capillary, so that's your reabsorption. Okay, with glomerular filtration, this is the net filtration pressure that is important for filtering out waste products. So a positive net filtration pressure means fluid is being pushed out of the glomerulus, and a negative net filtration pressure would mean the fluid is being pulled back in to the glomerulus. Okay, so as a result, we can measure this in people. So it's the GFR, or the glomerular filtration rate. Okay, so this is a lab that you can do on someone looking for their GFR. And just to give you some reference here, a 120 is essentially a perfect score of a GFR. And if a person is 15 or less, that's renal failure and they need dialysis. All right, the GFR must be precisely controlled. If it's too high, fluid flows through the renal tubules too quickly for them to be reabsorbed. Okay, so this is why blood pressure regulation is very important. And urine output rises, and then you risk dehydration and electrolyte depletion because you're losing too much fluid, and in this case, losing too much electrolytes. Okay, if the GFR, if that filtration rate is too low, then fluid flows sluggishly through the tubules, and they reabsorb waste that should have been eliminated. Okay, now keep in mind when you see this word reabsorb, that means you're keeping it. It's reabsorbing it. So it's keeping the waste that should have otherwise been eliminated, and azotemia is what is going to occur. Okay, so the AZOT part is French for nitrogen, and emia means blood. So simply put, there's too much nitrogen in the blood, or azotemia. All right, so the body autoregulates with renal autoregulation, sympathetic control, and hormonal control. So these are the three homeostatic mechanisms that help keep you in balance. Right, with renal autoregulation, this is the ability of the nephrons to adjust their own blood flow and GFR without external control. Okay, this is a very important built-in kidney function, and this allows them to have a stable GFR in spite of changes to arterial blood pressure. Okay, if GFR is high, if the GFR is high, the macula densa, which is this, it's a sensory, these are sensory cells. Okay, so when they detect high GFR, okay, so here's your high GFR. It is going to absorb sodium or nitrogen, potassium, chloride, and sodium. I'm sorry, not nitrogen, sodium. And so then water will follow. Water will follow. When that happens, cells enlarge, and that releases the ATP, adenosine triphosphate. All right, then the body, will take the adenosine. All right, your body is now going to take the adenosine, and it will communicate with the afferent arterioles. So adenosine communicates, or adenosine stimulates, those afferent arterioles that go into the glomerulus, and they will constrict. So when you take a tube that's nice and open and you constrict it, then you're going to decrease blood flow. All right, so that decreases blood flow, which then therefore will decrease your GFR. Under sympathetic control, now remember this is fight or flight. We can simply say this is the stress nervous system, and what is responsible for that is epinephrine, norepinephrine, also known as adrenaline. When you're in sympathetics, blood is actually decreased to the kidneys. And blood is therefore increased to your heart, to your lungs, to your skeletal muscle. Now think about fight or flight stuff. You want your heart rate to go up. You want skeletal muscle to get engorged with blood. You want the lungs to do better with gas exchange because you're going to fight or you're going to flight. So digestion slows down, and then kidney stuff slows down. So you have a reduce in GFR and a reduction in urine output because blood is redirected from the kidneys to the heart, brain, skeletal muscles where it's more urgently needed because this is a fight or flight situation. All right, the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism. All right, we covered this in endocrine system, I believe, but let's revisit that. So your stimulus, the stimulus is a drop in blood pressure. So currently we have a drop in blood pressure. So if the then the goal would be to increase blood pressure. All right, this is your body's way of compensating. If blood pressure is too low, you need to increase blood pressure. So we're going to go ahead and activate the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone mechanism. Okay, so what happens is the kidneys release renin, which is an enzyme. The liver releases angiotensinogen. Okay, angiotensinogen is converted into angiotensin 1, because of renin. Okay, in the presence of renin, angiotensinogen is converted into angiotensin 1. Okay, the lungs make and release angiotensin converting enzyme, also known as ACE, and what that does is it converts angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. Now think about the word angio, blood vessel, tension. So it's going to create tension to this tube, which means it's going to go from this nice open tube to a more constricted tube. And when you constrict a tube, when you hook a pump up to a constricted tube, blood pressure has to go up. So the pump has to work harder, so blood pressure will go up. Okay, now that takes care of the renin angiotensin part. Now what about aldosterone? Okay, aldosterone is released from the adrenal cortex. Okay, the adrenal cortex releases aldosterone, and in the presence of aldosterone, you're going to keep sodium and therefore water. Okay, so you have sodium and water retention, and if you keep sodium and water, so you're increasing blood volume, and that's going to increase blood pressure. Now remember, water is heavy, so the more fluid that you push into your blood vessels, the harder the pump has to work. Okay, so going back to our starting point here, which is a drop in blood pressure. Okay, so then therefore what's the goal? Increase blood pressure. So the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone mechanism is therefore active.